Medusa, the first ever floorless roller coaster manufactured by B&M, debuted in 1999. This ride stood 142 feet at speeds of about 60 miles per hour. This ride has quite the reputation and quite the history, as it was not always called Medusa. In 2009, in an effort to expand the DC universe throughout the park, re-themed Medusa into Bizarro, adding a new front entrance, different effects such as fire, mist, and some near miss elements, as well as a full repaint to blue and purple. However, a couple years after, in 2022, Medusa would make her triumphant return to the Frontier Adventures section of the park, removing the Bizarro color scheme and using its old effects as theming for the new rebranded Medusa. This is Arkham, and here is my review of the first ever B&M floorless roller coaster Medusa.
Now get ready. Here we go.
The Medusa of today would not be themed to the mythological creature known as Medusa, but rather as a deserted lost town called Medusa, to which the backstory behind this town can be read in the ride's queue, something completely absent from its originator. The story goes like this. The year was 1874, nearly 30 years after the height of the gold rush, when the hope of new beginnings and untold wealth drew prospectors to California from the farthest reaches of the globe. Stories of Earth rich, with silver, copper, borax, and of course, gold, drove 49ers to push past the harsh conditions of the arid California desert for the glimpse of a dream. Along the banks of the Owens River, Chrysopolis was home to immigrant brothers George and Demetrius Betos, whose Greek heritage inspired the town's name, meaning City of Gold. The settlement flourished for a short time until conflict and the town's isolation drove settlers away, unwavering in their quest for riches. The Betos brothers pushed east into Death Valley. Nestled in the Panamint Mountains, the brothers settled in a tiny town filled with outlaws in hiding, dubbed the meanest corner of hell that ever passed for a civilized town. Exile Canyon would prove an unforgiving, natural environment. Thanks to frequent earth tremors, many miners toiled for months in the blistering summer heat only to be crushed by falling rock. Those who survived the mines often died slow and painful deaths from venomous snake bites. Due to the town's unusual and perilous western diamondback rattlesnake infestation, with resources in very short supply, a devastating underground coal fire explosion burned half of the town to the ground. The Betos brothers were convinced that Exile Canyon was cursed by an evil presence holding sway over the settlement. Medusa, they whispered, the ancient Greek word meaning guardian. Could this guardian, a cursed creature born from sea gods with hair of snakes, the power to turn living things to stone with her electric eyes, and whose blood droplets instantly turn to snakes, be responsible for this town's plight? Greek legends weren't well known in the West, but the irony was unmistakable. Soon, the few remaining residents began calling the doomed outpost Medusa. Medusa's wrath was unraveling. Mining riches remained elusive. As poverty grew and hope faded, outlaws at odds caused further turmoil among the settlers, and in a final cruel blow, the town was wiped off the map by a ferocious flash flood, and the remaining settlers drowned or were buried under tons of mud and rock. Today, we honor the legend of this ill-fate mining town on the Great Frontier, and the mythological beast whose wrath may have destroyed the lives and dreams of everyone who settled there. Plunge back in time and slither with Medusa through the cursed outpost of Exile Canyon. A pretty dark tale, I might say. Once you get to the top of the stairs, you enter the station for your ride. You board your B&M floorless coaster train and pull down your over-the-shoulder restraint. Once you pull down your over-the-shoulder restraint and you buckle in the seatbelt that is in between your waist, the floor drops underneath you, and then you are ready to enter the lost town of Medusa. You take a left-hand turn out of the station before ascending your 142-foot climb. It's a rather slower climb, however, it does take you to the top at a rapid pace. Once you get to the top, you have a small pre drop before you have a twisted dive down that'll reach you at the 60 mph as intended. Going through a set of repainted elements that were on the former Bizarro, now colored black, seem to emulate maybe diamonds or some kind of mineral perhaps you are going through. You go through these, sometimes they spray mist, sometimes they don't, and this takes you into your first of 7 inversions on the ride, a vertical loop. A pretty good element that does have a little bit of weightlessness at the top. After your vertical loop, you are then reached into a dive loop, which will sometimes, on occasion, release some flamethrowers, if it is on a good day, of course. It doesn't always happen as of this season, but hopefully it's something that will come back in the future. After the dive loop, you reach one of my favorite inversions of the ride, the zero G roll, that goes directly over the pathway, and everyone in the vicinity is able to see this majestic roll go right above as people are heading to enter the ride. After this, you have what is the most iconic element on the ride, as everybody that goes to this ride has to go under it, the Cobra Roll. Pretty fitting for a ride that is themed to a mythical beast that has snakes for hair, I might say. The Cobra Roll features an Immelman that goes into essentially a Sidewinder, and that's basically merged together. It's 2 inversions in one. Usually, this kind of inversion is not a fan favorite of a lot of people. However, I don't really mind it that much. It's actually really cool. It's a very fun one to watch and is often used for very iconic shots of photos and video. One thing I do have to point out about this is the valley going into the mid-course break. This valley always has a very bad jerk to it. It's really, really bad. You feel the shakiness of that right there. It could be because of the age of this ride, and obviously it's been around since 1999. So right now the ride is approximately 25 years old as of the making of this video. So I do have to say it could be just those effects and the fact that its lifespan is coming to a close very, very soon. But once you hit the mid course, as of this season, it unfortunately is running very slow in the second half. Usually they don't put the mid course brakes on this harshly, but most instances they've been turning them up pretty heavily. So the second half of the ride is not as good as it used to be. But you take a dive off to the left, and then you hit this small, like 270-degree turnaround where you go past some of the buildings that are supposed to replicate the town of Medusa, including one that you actually phase right through. These are leftover set pieces from Bizarro that are just repainted orange. I kind of wish they had a little bit extra, like, Western town theming things to it just to give it a little bit more flair and understanding that it is a town that you're going through and not just orange blocks that could be Lego bricks at this rate. You go through a small, little, not really hill that doesn't give you any airtime at all before you go through the interlocking corkscrews. These interlocking corkscrews are actually really cool and have a nice little hand chopper element in the form of the mister, which I don't even know if there's a proper name for it now that it was rebranded to Medusa. It was something that was added when it was Bizarro. Sometimes the mist has worked, sometimes it doesn't, but I still think that it's a pretty fun element that has some nice near miss to it. However, I don't think it really affects me anymore. That's just me. It's a pretty cool element though. After you go through the interlocking corkscrews, you then go through a little bit of a dive, and that takes you into the brake run for the ride. It's actually quite a longer ride experience than one might think it is. Um, as of this season, it's only been running one train, which kind of is a bit disappointing. I'm not going to grade it based off of that. However, in terms of the ride experience itself, you really can't go wrong with the ride on Medusa, in my personal opinion. It's always just a consistently great roller coaster. It does have its bumps, it does have its shakiness and its rattle to it on some occasions in certain areas. Hello, bottom of the Cobra Roll. There are some really strong moments of elements on this ride. Personally, I've always had it placed below Batman, and these two are usually always jockeying for that top five spot in the park for me. It's always really difficult, but it's never been a standout attraction, even with and throughout. So it's one of those kind of rides that, much like Batman, is just a fantastic supporting cast and is really, really strong when it comes to inversions. And usually, when it's running all three trains, it oftentimes has a pretty short line because not a lot of people would go to the back of the park for it. So it's not a very hard ride to marathon, especially earlier on in the day. But as it gets much busier, it gets a lot more difficult. We don't exactly know the extent of what's going on with it. However, hopefully, that's something that is resolved in the future. Overall, despite Medusa opening 25 years ago, it still holds up extremely well. And a lot of people who have ridden just about every kind of B&M floorless coaster puts this ride pretty high up on the list. And it's understandable. It has some good forces, it has some great inversions, and it still has a pretty quality layout with a good amount of elements. Every element hits, and every single part of the ride is great. If the ride is consistently running at a very low and solid pace, it could really be quite the ride to take on. However, I cannot put it any higher than I would like to put it, mainly because of the mid course brake run. Don't know if that's an operator choice or it's just because they have to have that exact setting placed for the ride. However, other than that, it's still a really good roller coaster, but I cannot give it any higher of a score than this on the board because right now I definitely have had better rides in the past than what I've had this season. But I hope you guys enjoyed this review of Medusa. If you want more reviews, leave a like button down below, comment, and subscribe. This is Arkham. Always think your ride ops, and have a great rest of your day. Bye!
Here we go.